Okay, so today we are talking with Janice, beloved Janice. I've just grown so fond of you over the years. Many of you may not know that when we started youth group, when we were first youth pastors, I don't know however many years ago that was now, 3 or 4 years ago or something like that, 5 years ago. Janice came to us and said, I would love to bake for you and the teens. And we soon found out that that was one of your many giftings, but your baked goods are world renowned and the most delicious things. And we looked forward to them every Thursday night, Jeff and I and all the teenagers. You would just bring the most delicious things, and Janice would always ask us week to week, what were we wanting? And you would always just make us something unique and different every time. And it's not why I love you, but I do love that about you.
It helps.
It helps, yeah. Yeah, that's kind of how we really got to know you was through you just approaching us and offering baked goods. But we want to get to know you today, Janice. We want everyone to see how wonderful you are. Why don't you tell us something that maybe people don't know about you, maybe a fun fact or something?
Well, when I became a Christian, I was living in Vancouver in Kitsilano. And at the time, I didn't really know it because I had been doing drugs and alcohol for so long, but I was addicted to crack. And I had a very successful life. We had a beautiful apartment, the man I lived with. I had a really good job. I was starting a catering business. And so I thought I was doing great. But addiction, no matter how pretty its face, is still a really degrading and corroding thing in your life. And we were a very successful young couple, the man I lived with and I, and people didn't see us in that way. And so it furthered the illusion that we had it together.
Right.
But I was probably a year away from being on downtown East Side.
Wow. Yeah, I don't think I knew the depths of that either. What before we get into a little bit more about you, why don't you let us know sort of where you're at right now in life? I know where you're at. I know you have children and grandchildren, and you've got your wonderful Bill. But why don't you let us know how long you guys have been together and the ages of your grandchild and all that stuff?
Well, we met in 82 and we got married in 83. So it's almost 40 years. It was 38 years this year that Bill and I have been together, but 39 that we've known each other. We met at the church I was attending at the time. He was attending a different church, but coming to Bible college at our church. And I tried to kick him out of the church. I was doing volunteer secretarial work, and I knew all the tradesmen and the pastors and everybody, and I didn't know who this scruffy guy was. So. And he decided then that I was the one. It took me about 3 months to catch the vision. So
yeah, it usually takes the woman a little bit longer, right?
Yeah. Well, because of my past and the extent of my foolishness, I really felt that I'd kind of had my chance at the brass ring at relationship, and perhaps God was calling me to be celibate.
Oh, okay.
And so I just wasn't looking, and I certainly wasn't looking for a guy who came from a Mennonite church. So.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, people who didn't have drums in church service, like what?
Yeah, yeah. Seems a little odd. Yeah. So, and you have how many kids? I know that
we have 2 children, biological children, Justice, who just turned 36 yesterday, and Sarah, who turned 34 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. And you have other kids that are not biological, but that you should consider.
Us parents,
have a mother then that call you Mama.
Most of them call me Mama J. A few call Bill Papa, but because that's what our kids called him. We have 1 grandchild only, but I'll happily adopt somebody else's just to practice more. And we did fostering for 20 years. And because we did fostering at a very high level of care, needing care, those kids were often completely bankrupt when it came to family. So we became their family because we were all they had in that transition from the brokenness they were in to the wholeness they were heading towards.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're still maintaining some of those relationships, aren't you?
I would say over 50% of them, yes.
Wow. Yeah.
And,
that's pretty incredible.
And some just, some don't have any other parents. And then we had one of our son's friends came to spend the weekend and left 14 months later. And,
Wow.
and he considers us his real parents.
Yeah.
And his wife, who's from Kazakhstan, also considers us her Canadian parents. So we're very fortunate, you know.
Yeah, wow.
We're not without children.
Yeah, it speaks a lot to who you and Bill are as people and your hearts. And I just love that about you both.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
I was told I couldn't have children before I became a Christian. I was told I wouldn't be able to conceive. And so to be able to not only bear 2 children, but to fill our house with children, which was my idea of heaven.
Yeah.
You know, we were the privileged ones. We never felt that they owed us something. They gave us lots.
That's so cool. Well, why don't we get into a bit of your story, a little bit more of, you know, your journey to relationship with Jesus and how that happened for you, and, you know, who Jesus has been for you, and where you met him and all that. We'd love to hear that.
So I live with a man named James, whom I'm still friends with. Bill and I are still friends with. He's a lovely man. We lived in Kits, and we had friends who would often just stay with us, sleep on our couch or whatever. Because of the alcohol and drugs we did, we always had lots of people around. And one friend, Frank, came in one day with a Bible that he found on the hood of his car. And Frank never passed out, but apparently he passed out for 5 minutes when he came home. Woke up and there was this Bible. So I started reading it. It was King James Version, which I truly love. I love the poetry of the language. And so I asked him if I could read it, and I started reading it. And, you know, I figured I'd start at the beginning and work my way through.
Mm-hmm.
And being a really serious reader, you can't read the Old Testament without seeing that it's heading somewhere, that it's heading towards someone.
Okay.
There were all those foreshadowings and archetypes and all those things. So when I got to the New Testament, I met Jesus for the first time. I was raised a Catholic, but raised in a Catholic church that pretty much acknowledged only Mary. And Jesus was just a guy who either was a baby or walked around with lambs. And so I had no idea of his personality, of his character, of his humanity. And so I started reading about this Jesus. Like, I grew up in Ladner. I know what fishermen are like. They're rough trade. Those guys don't leave their boats. They'd leave their wives before they'd leave their boats. And he had fishermen following him. They were just dropping their nets and following him, and that blew my mind. I couldn't understand how somebody who had nothing could have such power. And the more I read through the 4 Gospels, the more I was attracted by this strong man. Like, he had to be strong, physically strong. He walked everywhere. He had to be hardy. He owned nothing. You know, the Jesus I met in the New Testament was a Jesus I had no idea existed. And I wanted to know. But it wasn't until I got to Revelation, or to the scripture that says, behold, I stand at the door and knock, and whosoever will let me in, I will enter. And there are no qualifications on that. I was the house. I knew that. I'm the house. And here was God on earth, you know, the Son of Heaven, and he wanted to walk into my life. And I knew my life, as pretty as our apartment was, as well as I dressed, I was um, a relatively attractive young woman, and as nice as the exterior of my life was, I knew the desolation I lived in inside.
Wow.
I'd been raised with enough morals and character to know that.
Right.
And he wasn't saying, clean up your show. He
Yeah.
wasn't saying, if you do this and if you do that. It was unqualified.
Yeah.
You open the door, I'll come in.
Hmm.
And I wanted that.
Wow.
I wanted him to come in, but I had no one to talk to. I lived within walking distance of 3 evangelical churches, but I'd never really met a Christian who loved Jesus. I'd met a lot of rule keepers, and of course, being raised the way I was, I knew all the don'ts, but I never presumed that God would want a relationship with me.
Hmm.
And in my house, my dad didn't break bread with you. He didn't share salt with you if you had displeased him. And so for me to hear that God wanted to come in and sit and sup with me, to eat with me, was, there was no drug that could blow my mind more than that.
So beautiful.
It was insane.
Yeah.
And so I used to jog. I was trying to quit smoking. So I used to jog to kind of every morning on Kitts Beach. And one day I had to stop. I thought my lungs were going to come out my mouth. I was coughing so hard. And I sat up against this log and I just talked to God, and I just told him, you know who I am. You know who I am. There's no secrets in my life from you. You know I live with a man I'm not married to. You know I do drugs. You know I drink. You know I swear. You know I can be a really mean person. But if you want me, you got me.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the condensed version.
Yeah.
And I'm just sobbing. It's like 5:30 in the morning in July, so it's light out. And from the other side of the log, this drunk, this rubby, this homeless person came up from the other side and went, "Amen, sister," and flopped back down.
Oh, you were talking out loud.
I was talking out loud, yeah.
Wow.
I'm not a quiet person. It was a Kitts Beach. No one was around. I figured I was okay to talk. And in that moment, that charmed me because God had a good sense of humor.
Yes.
He could have made the beach empty.
Right.
He could have made nobody there. He's God,
Yeah, yeah.
He can do anything.
Yeah.
But he allowed that drunken, homeless person to be my witness.
Wow.
And it was, I walked on air for the rest of the day. I couldn't believe that this had happened to me.
Yeah.
I didn't deserve it.
Yeah.
I didn't merit it.
Yeah.
I didn't earn it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, you knew that God sees you,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that he would allow someone else to be there to make me laugh, because I had turned myself inside out. I'd been talking to God for about half an hour, 45 minutes. So this guy heard everything.
Wow. Wow. I wonder what happened to him.
Yeah.
Maybe he got saved that day. Or,
Who knows?
Who knows?
He certainly had a good story to tell his friends.
Yes. That is incredible. I love that. I just heard that. I've never heard your full. I know there's so much more to it, but that was so beautiful. I love the wisdom that God gave you. You didn't have anyone walking with you. It's just you and the Bible and the Holy Spirit, and there he is, just meeting you. It's so
just the word.
Yeah.
Like there was, when we used to go around with those 4 spiritual laws books and talk to people, I couldn't believe people didn't get saved because it made it so easy. I had to work so hard to figure it out.
Right. Yeah.
So I moved away from Kitts with my girlfriend. She was sharing our apartment, and we both decided we were going to move to Abbotsford. She she had given her life to Christ years before, but completely fallen away. And we kind of were paralleling in our search at the same time.
Okay.
And so we decided we were going to move to Abbotsford. I left James, and I moved to Abbey. I started going to Abbotsford Christian Assembly, as it was called then. It's Hill City now. And that was in 1981. Yeah. And so it's July 21st, 81 that I gave myself to Christ.
Wow.
So this July will be 40 years. So
Yeah.
it's kind of weird. And I really didn't have much plans beyond 30 in the life I lived. I had a spinal disease that was slowly eating my spine. And so I probably was going to be a paraplegic by the time I was 30. So for me, 30, if I made it to 30, that was great. And I was 22, just before 23, before I gave my life to Christ.
Wow.
So every day I get up and walk. It's a gift.
Yeah. Did you have like a moment where you felt like, has it just been every day is just trusting in him, or did you have a moment or a day where you felt God healed you? Or
Oh yeah, I was in a church service, and it's just one of those things. If you've got a bad back, stand up and put your hand on. And I was a really new Christian, and I figured, okay, well, he's in touch with God. I'll just be obedient, and I'm not naturally a submissive person. I like to argue things, like to figure things out on my own. I don't like people telling me to do stuff, or at least I didn't then. But I stood up and I put my hand on my back, and I went back home that night. And the next morning when I woke up, I didn't even put a cigarette in my mouth first thing, because I was smoking then. I just got in my bed and my knees hit the floor, and I started praising God. And it was, again, kind of not how I usually did things. I would wake up, have a smoke, have a coffee, and read my Bible. And I all of a sudden realized when I looked at the clock, I'd been there for 2 hours, and I couldn't figure out why. I almost felt high, and it was because I was pain-free for the first time since I was 16 years old.
Wow.
And I didn't have it medically proven until many years later, when I had a spinal x-ray, and I asked her about the curvature in my spine and the crumbling discs, and she said, I don't know who told you that, because your spine's perfectly straight and all your discs are there. So I was in my 30s by the time I had medical confirmation, but I knew at that time.
That's so incredible.
Yeah, it's just, God has been so gracious and so good.
Yeah.
And then I met Bill about 7-8 months after I got saved, and we started hanging out. And he was a good buddy. He was a really good buddy. I would cook for him Wednesday nights, and he would drive me into church because my girlfriend would go in with her boyfriend, and they didn't want me hanging around. So it wasn't, for him, it was courtship. For me, it was just, this is Bill who drives me to church Wednesday night.
Yeah. And the rest is history.
If we had been dating, when he put ketchup on the shrimp souffle I made him one night, it would have been over.
Oh, man. Gross.
They put ketchup on eggs, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. I wonder if we could just end our time together. If you could maybe tell me what is one thing these days that is bringing you joy, even in the midst of all this kind of stuff over the past year, but what's bringing you joy these days?
Oh, I would say this season. I love spring. I love renewal and love new growth. But if there's a specific thing, it would be our grandson, Malcolm.
Yeah.
He is a constant reminder, of growth, of change. His excitement and his discovery of the world and words and expressing himself reminds me of how precious those things are. It's the same with your kids, right? When your kids are small and they see things for the first time, you engage with them in that.
Yeah, it's like you're discovering it all over again for yourself.
Yeah, that's right. You get to redo. And so yeah, I would say Malcolm is definitely something that brings me a lot of joy. But I'm also um, constantly humbled and grateful by the quality of the relationship Phil and I have.
Mm.
My health hasn't been great. Um, his job is very wearing,
Mhm.
and we still have lots of times of laughter and companionship. We still
Right.
enjoy being together and doing
Yeah.
things together.
Yeah.
Um, it's really a gift
Yeah.
having. I've known him almost as long as I've known Jesus.
That's so beautiful. I love that. That's one of my prayers and my hopes and my desires for Jeff and I, for as we grow old, that we grow closer together and have that. I love
It's
that.
work.
Yeah.
Marriage is hard work,
Mm-hmm.
but every time life throws us a curveball, not only do we manage it, we come out of it closer.
Yeah.
And this last year has been
Right.
tough on so many levels. And right now things are just kind of stressful, but we have that core thing that
Mm.
like well, in the Catholic Church, altar boys would carry incense, in this beautifully worked copper, brass, silver ball and swing it.
Yes.
And it was representative of the core of worship. But sometimes I feel like that's feels in my relationship. We have this core.
Mm.
It can't be put out.
Right.
It's there, but we have to tend it.
Yes.
We have to care for it. But it's always there, always warming us, always giving off a fragrance, even when we're not getting along, even when things are crappy. That core is there, waiting for its chance to just burn a little brighter.
Yeah. The flames are still lit.
The embers are there. Yeah.
Embers. Yeah. That's beautiful. Well, thank you, Janice, for sharing your story with us. That blessed my heart so much, and I know it's going to bless everyone who hears it. That was just a beautiful story, not only of you and Jesus, but you and Bill and just God's redemption and his. I love Jesus so very much, but I love how, he just blows all of our understanding and concepts of him out of the water. He just comes in and he meets us where we're at, and he doesn't mind. He does not mind the mess, and he's just so okay with it. And I
Yeah.
just think
Like we all feel like we're very ordinary people, but we're not.
right.
God's love for us makes us extraordinary
Mm.
because when you think about the word supernatural, like it's ultra.
Yeah.
God supernaturally invests in us.
Yeah.
We are his ultra.
Yeah.
We are his extraordinary. And so none of us should ever feel like, oh, I'm just,
Right.
like I have a dramatic story because I started doing drugs and alcohol so very young and because of childhood trauma. But you don't need a dramatic story to be extraordinary.
Yeah.
God's love is so huge and extraordinary. It makes you extraordinary.
Yeah. That is a good note to end on. I love that. Thank you so much, Janice. I have to get you preaching. Like, seriously, that was awesome. Thank you.
You're very welcome. You might not get me off the podium though if you let me up there. It could be dangerous.